if you weren't there for the hype of Harry Potter coming out and the hype for Game of Thrones coming out, I'm sorry, you're just gonna have to take that L. Like, it really was like you just had to be there kind of moments. We gave that show such the benefit of the doubt. We didn't know that Game of Thrones was gonna be so ass in the end. But now, like, any new person coming in, is like the ending for Game of Thrones is infamously bad. Like, people who had never seen the show know how bad the ending for Game of Thrones is, and so they're in an awful situation where even if you watch it now and you really enjoy those first 4 seasons, it's like a big cloud of doom approaching that you know that, like, oh shit, by season 5 it's gonna get really bad. And then the books aren't a good alternative to that either, because there's still to this day, no ending for the books. And I'm sorry to break it to you fans, I'm gonna hold your hand as I say this to you. There never is going to be an ending to the books. And so, and there's never going to be an ending to Fire and Blood. There's never going to be an ending to Dunk and Egg either. It is a permanently broken franchise, and it will always be so, tragically, which is a shame, because had George finished it, or someone finished it, it's so sad that the ending for Game of Thrones is the only canonical ending, because had George finished it, he probably would be on that Mount Rushmore of fantasy authors next to Tolkien, Robert E. Howard, Michael Moorcock. Yeah, he would have been right next to the rest of them, but I can't put him up there now because he didn't finish. He didn't make it to the finish line.
That's also something I haven't been able to understand for years, because it has been like flowing in the zeitgeist that George hasn't continued the story in a long ass time. Is he still like writing that book in the background, or has he just given up on it?
He, in every single blog post that he does, he has his own blog where he talks about like football and what he's been doing lately. And every single one, it ends with, "Yes, I'm still working on Winds of Winter." The reason why it's taking so long is 3 reasons. I could sum it up. 1, George procrastinates. He gets easily distracted by like different projects because, like, you know, I would let me pull out like a bit of we were talking about Shakespeare earlier. Let me make my own kind of Shakespearean proverb here. Low to anyone who becomes wealthy later on in their life, because that's what happened to George, where he got rich. He's now a billionaire, basically. He got rich at the tail end of his life, whenever he's an old man. And, you know, whenever you get rich, you want to be in, like, a young state where you're, like, you know, hookers on each arm. You're just swimming in coke and gold and just, like, gorge yourself on, like, excess. You can't do that whenever you're, like, an old man. And so instead, he like pumps all of his money into all these different projects that he's done. Like he's opened schools, he's opened theater clubs, he's opened a bar recently. He's funded all these screenplays and student films and things like that. And so like all these things take up his time, and he gets distracted, and he procrastinates. He procrastinates like everyone's done this in their life, where there's something you need to do, but you don't want to do it. Or it's very hard to do it, so you go like, well, I kind of need to do this other thing. And so you go do the other thing. And maybe you do need to go do the other thing, but it's not as important as, you know, the thing that you should be doing, you know. So that's one reason why it's taken so long. Second reason is that he's pretty depressed. Particularly after COVID, a lot of his friends died during COVID. And, you know, he's sort of like a hippie liberal kind of guy. So back in the 80s, he was a communist. So he's pretty depressed with
with the state of the world, right?
The state of the world right now. So all that together is making him depressed. And also, he's never had any children. He talks about how he gets depressed about his legacy, where he doesn't think that he'll be remembered. And then the third and final problem with why he can't finish the book is because he's kind of written him from where the last book left off. He kind of written himself into a corner where, like, he had these plans have changed, and like I've heard his plans. Like, he's talked about his plans, and he's talked about how he wants to end the book. But from where the characters are at the moment, it isn't actually kind of possible for him to end the book in the way that he initially planned. And so he's kind of stuck, and he's really, like, there's a lot of, like, knots that he's trying to untangle. And just because it's such a massive franchise as well, like, let me put it into perspective. There are over 2,000 named characters in the Song of Ice and Fire franchise. There's 27, I think, point of view characters. There's two entire continents of subplots and like all these different details and loose ends and threads and stories and plot lines. It's just insane. Like, it is the most, I will probably say, it's probably the most nuanced bit of fantasy ever written. To the points where it's just snowballed out of control from the author, and he can't make it cohesive anymore. So those are the main reasons why he hasn't written a book in that franchise in 13 years. Yeah, really, that's how long we've been waiting. It's cruel, man. So whatever you said, I should get into A Song of Ice and Fire. A devil and an angel appeared on my shoulders. We're like, what do I tell Az to do? Like, yes, these are really great, wonderful books that I enjoy. However, to be a fan of this franchise is to be Sisyphus. It is to roll that boulder up a hill, and maybe you'll find enjoyment out of rolling that boulder. I don't know. I don't know if I enjoy it. It's like, it's an awful situation.
Not gonna lie, now that you've given me more information about George as a person, now I want to read those books even more, because I relate to a lot of the shit you said about him.
Oh, which parts?
The fact that I am very easily prone to procrastination. Like, I have to force myself to finish a project. Like, even when I make reviews, like, starting making reviews, that shit took me like 5 years. Like, I wanted to start making those reviews. I already had like the synopsis and like all the plans, all the bullet points, all the ideas planned out like 5 to 7 years ago. And I only started making them last year. Then I took a hiatus for a whole year off of making videos, mostly because my health deteriorated and there were some other issues. So that one isn't solely on my procrastination.
Yeah.
But now I'm back to making videos, and every time I make the next one, there's like this very heavy feeling of like, we can start tomorrow, Herman. We can start another day.
Or you can distract yourself with something else that you should do. Yeah. Well, yeah, like everyone does that, really. If we don't procrastinate, we'll like find something to help us pseudo-procrastinate. We're like, no, I'm still being productive. I'm still doing X, Y, or Z, but like, maybe you are, but there should be something else that you ought to be doing. You know, yeah. I think you'd actually be a huge fan of George, because you two are very much of the same minds. But aside from that, like, you both are very similar in that you're atheists, but you're also very romantic. Where you don't like or agree with Christianity, and Game of Thrones and A Song of Ice and Fire is a very anti-Christian, anti-religious piece of fiction. However, you both are emphatically in love with romance, and a lot of that romance came from religious works.
Well, yeah. Well, you can also trace the etymology of that to the idea of fiction and mythology as a whole. But like you know me, my biggest gripe, even if I may not like side with the biblical texts themselves, my biggest gripe is always with the church as a system, and not like people of faith. Like, I will never attack a person of faith because they believe in something I don't. Because that's just a dickhead thing to do.
And even George himself also does that, where like the religious organizations of A Song of Ice and Fire, I think all of the organizations are evil. However, individual religious characters in the story, a lot of them are pretty good. Like, there's a subplot where, this character called Brienne, for example, goes throughout, the wilderness and just sort of like is exploring around. And she keeps on running into a whole bunch of religious characters, like priests and just followers of the faith.
Curry.
And they're all pretty good people, for the most part. But it's more the institutions that both you and George criticize. And not that, like, I don't criticize them. Okay, here's what I'd recommend to you. So actually, A Song of Ice and Fire isn't my favorite story that George ever wrote. My favorite thing that he ever wrote was a series of short books called the Dunk and Egg Trilogy.
Fishy.
Or the Night of the Seven Kingdoms Trilogy.
Earwax flavour.
And they are spin-offs off of Game of Thrones. They're very short, where, like, A Song of Ice and Fire are just these massive tomes. The Dunk and Egg books are really short. Like, I think one Ice and Fire book is longer than all of the Dunk and Egg books put together. Very short stories. And all is just this knight called Sir Duncan the Tall and his squire Egg, and it's just kind of a day in the life of what it's like to live a life in Westeros, the location where Game of Thrones takes place, and it's wonderful. It's so lovely, and that's where you saw the quotes that I had in my anniversary video. That's where that's from. Of you're a knight and a fool, and sweet lady, all men are knights and fools to those they love. It's just, I think about that line so much. It's wonderful. So, if you want to get into it, I'd recommend that. The audiobook is great on Audible, if you want to get it. And it's super short and far less overwhelming than the rest of A Song of Ice and Fire. And they have endings. They actually have endings. And this goes to show that whenever George actually does make an ending, he's really fucking good at it. Like, his endings are fantastic whenever he actually makes them. Which is probably why he's so scared to end A Song of Ice and Fire, because he doesn't, in his head, he doesn't know how.